She plugged her Tesla into my power outlet again, for the third night in a row, and this time, she didn't even bother hiding it. The cable stretched right across my yard like a snake, humming with the power I paid for. When I stepped outside, she stood there with her arms crossed, like she owned the whole block. "Don't touch that," she snapped. "The HOA approved it." The HOA didn't approve anything. I wasn't even in her HOA. My house was one of the few old properties on the edge of the neighborhood, grandfathered out. But Karen had decided that everything she wanted was automatically a rule. The kind of woman who believed her voice was louder than the law. "I told you yesterday," I said calmly, "stop using my power." She smirked, a slow, mocking smile. "Well, maybe you should be more neighborly," she whispered. "Besides, your meter won't even notice." My meter had noticed last month when my bill doubled. I thought it was a glitch until I caught her at 2 a.m. tiptoeing with the charging cable like she was stealing fruit from someone else's tree. Tonight, though, something felt different. She looked too confident, almost excited. Then she pulled out a folded paper from her bag and waved it like a victory flag. "New HOA directive," she said proudly. "All properties attached to this block must provide resource support for community vehicles. And since your house is on the corner, that includes you." The paper wasn't official. I could see the ink bleeding at the edges, printed from a cheap home printer. But her attitude, that was real. She actually believed she could control me with the fake set of rules. I didn't answer. I just stared at her. That made her uncomfortable. "You don't want trouble, right?" she said, voice softer but sharper. "People around here listen to me." She had no idea who she was threatening. She had no idea about the people who listened to me, and she definitely didn't know that the small metal box behind my shed wasn't just a power box like she assumed. As her Tesla hummed louder, feeding from my grid, I felt a slow smile forming. She thought she was draining me. She had no clue what she had just plugged herself into. A line popped into my head, cold and calm. If she wants my power so badly, she's about to get all of it.
Karen didn't even wait for my response. She turned her back and started brushing imaginary dust off her Tesla, like she had just claimed a new territory. The humming grew louder, almost greedy. Her car was pulling power like a starving beast, and she stood there admiring it as if she'd beaten me. But she didn't notice the tiny green light on the side of my shed flicker. That shed wasn't just a shed. Inside it was the backup grid I had built with my late dad, a system designed for emergencies, storms, power cuts. Dad had been an electrical engineer for the state, and he taught me everything. We built that backup grid to protect our land, not realizing that one day it might protect us from a neighbor. Karen saw it as a free battery. I saw it as a trap she had just walked into. She suddenly leaned toward me with that smug face. "Oh, by the way," she said, "if you disconnect my charge again, I'll report you for grid tampering. It's an HOA violation." I almost laughed. Grid tampering. Meanwhile, she was literally siphoning electricity from a property she had no legal power over. But I didn't say anything. Silence hits people harder than shouting. Her eyes narrowed. "You look awfully calm today," she muttered. "Why shouldn't I be?" I said quietly. That made her step back, just a half inch, but I noticed. Then out of nowhere, she raised her voice like a switch flipped inside her. "Actually, I changed my mind," she snapped. "My car needs a full charge tonight. Don't even think about coming near it. I have cameras watching." Cameras? Funny. I had cameras too, real ones, recorded in HD. And one of them was aimed right at her cable and the small voltage spike that had just started moving back toward her car. The system didn't overload things instantly. It wasn't dangerous. It was designed so that if someone siphoned power illegally, the backup grid would surge back just enough to shut the source down. My dad called it the kickback. And Karen had no idea she had just triggered it. The charger crackled, soft at first, then louder. A faint spark danced near the connector. Karen turned, frowning. What was that? Her Tesla screen blinked. Once. Then again. Error codes flashed. I stepped forward, pretending to be confused. Something wrong? She pulled the plug in panic, and the moment it disconnected, a loud pop echoed through the yard. Her car's entire charging port went dark, like a dying eye. "What did you do?" she screamed. I just looked at the dead port, then at her shaking hands. "You wanted my power. Looks like you got a little too much." Her face went pale, then furious. And that's when she whispered the line that told me things were about to get much, much worse. "You messed with the wrong woman. I'm bringing the HOA president here tomorrow, and you'll wish you never lived on this land."
Karen didn't storm off this time. She marched. Every stomp of her heels echoed down the sidewalk like she was announcing a war. She kept looking back at her Tesla, clutching the dead charger port like it was a murdered pet. The porch lights flickered across her face, and for the first time, she didn't look confident. She looked afraid. But not of me, of losing control. I locked my gate behind me and stepped inside, but my mind kept replaying her last words. "I'm bringing the HOA president here tomorrow." Good. Let him come. Because I already knew something she didn't. The HOA president wasn't exactly a clean man, and I had proof of it sitting quietly inside my old laptop. Proof I never planned to use. He had tried to fine me 2 years ago for non-compliant hedge height, forgetting that I wasn't even under his HOA jurisdiction. When I pushed back, he tried to send me doctored photos. What he didn't know was that my cameras caught him taking those evidence pictures on my property at 11 p.m. Trespassing? Forgery? Harassment? But I let it go back then. I believed in peace. Tonight, peace didn't seem like an option. The next morning, the sun wasn't even up when I heard voices outside my window. Karen's sharp screech stood out like a knife scraping glass. "There! Right there! That's the outlet he rigged. He sabotaged my car." A man's voice followed, deep but shaky. "Karen, calm down. Let me look first." I recognized it instantly. The HOA president, Mark. Tall, balding, always wearing sunglasses, like he was auditioning for a cop show. He strutted across my yard like it was already his. I stepped outside slowly, sipping my coffee. Mark lifted his chin. "Morning. We need to talk about a serious violation." Karen crossed her arms behind him, smirking like she had already won. "What violation?" I asked. Mark pulled out a thick folder. Too thick. Suspiciously thick. "This," he said, tapping the top, "is a list of community regulations that—" I cut him off. "This property isn't under your HOA. You know that." Karen jumped in. "Actually, that changed last month. You're automatically included now." Mark nodded, pretending to be official. "A boundary extension." Funny. I already knew that boundary extension proposal was rejected by the county 6 weeks ago. "So you're enforcing rules based on a change that doesn't legally exist." Mark stiffened. Karen's smirk twitched. "Listen," he said, lowering his voice. "You can cooperate, or this gets complicated. We can issue fines, lots of them, backdated." Ah, there it was. The real game. Karen wanted power. Mark wanted money. I took a step closer, and both of them tensed like they expected me to yell. Instead, I smiled. "You two really should check the mailbox before threatening someone." Karen blinked. "What mailbox?"
The one at the end of the block. County notices came today. That was a lie. But they didn't know that. Karen glanced nervously toward the street. Mark's forehead creased. Something in their expression told me they were worried, not about me, but about whatever paperwork I might be holding. Before they could react, I added quietly, "And, by the way, you really shouldn't stand near that outlet." Mark froze. "Why?" I pointed at the Tesla cable still lying in the grass. "Because last night, it wasn't just your car that overloaded." Karen's jaw dropped. "What are you talking about?" I looked at Mark. "Your little boundary extension wasn't the only thing exposed." Mark's face went white. He knew. Somehow he knew I had something on him. Karen looked between us, confused and angry. "Mark, what are you talking about? What did you do?" He didn't answer. He just stared at me like I was holding the match over a pile of gasoline. And in that quiet moment, a single thought crossed his eyes. He's not the one we should have tried to bully.
Karen's confusion lasted only a second before it turned into rage. "Mark, say something! He burnt my charging port! He attacked my property!" Mark didn't look at her. He kept staring at me like I had just whispered a secret only he could hear. Finally, he cleared his throat. "Karen, maybe we should verify a few things before—" "No!" she snapped. "You promised me you'd handle him. You said he'd be forced to pay for everything." Ah, so that was their deal. I folded my arms. "Funny. Sounds like blackmail." Mark winced. Karen rolled her eyes. "Oh, please, don't act dramatic. You stole my electricity. That makes you the criminal." Her voice hit the air like a siren, loud enough that a few neighbors peeked through curtains. Karen loved audiences. She wanted a show. But she didn't realize I was about to give her one. I turned and walked toward the shed. Karen flinched, whispering to Mark, "See, he's hiding something. He's guilty." Mark grabbed her arm. "Stop talking." He knew better. He could feel the ground shifting. I opened the shed door just enough so they could see inside. The backup grid hummed softly, small lights blinking in patterns that only someone trained would understand. Dad used to say it looked like a heartbeat. Karen squinted. What is that supposed to be?" I shrugged. "The thing your Tesla latched onto last night." Mark stepped forward, panic crawling into his voice. "Wait, your backup runs at higher voltage, doesn't it?" Karen blinked at him. "Why does that matter? It's just electricity." He closed his eyes and whispered, "Karen, it matters a lot." I leaned against the frame. "Relax. Nothing illegal. Nothing dangerous. The system simply kicks back when someone tries to siphon power without authorization." Karen's face turned red. "You're lying. You sabotaged my car." "I didn't touch your car," I said calmly. "Your actions triggered the surge. You did this to yourself." She opened her mouth to scream again, then something unexpected happened. A new voice cut through the air from behind them. "Is everything all right here?" We all turned. Officer Blake, a local cop, was walking up the driveway. Tall, steady, calm. The kind of officer who didn't take sides and didn't tolerate nonsense. Karen immediately plastered on her innocent face. "Officer, thank God you're here. He damaged my vehicle and threatened us." Officer Blake looked at her, then at the charger lying in the grass, then at me. "Threatened you? When?" "This morning. He said something about exposing us." Blake raised an eyebrow. "Exposing you for what?" Karen froze. Mark swallowed hard. Blake shifted his gaze to me. "Mind telling me your side?" I nodded. "Sure, but before I do, there's something you should know." Karen stiffened. "Don't believe anything he says." I ignored her. I pointed at Mark.
He and Karen tried to enforce HOA boundaries that don't exist, and he trespassed on my land last year trying to fabricate violations. Mark's eyes widened. That's not true. Actually, I have video, I said gently. Blake straightened. Video? Karen whipped around to face Mark. Wait, you did what? Mark raised his hands. Karen, calm down. He's bluffing. I met Blake's eyes. He's not. My dad installed cameras with internal backups. The system stores everything. Blake exhaled slowly. All right, I'll need to see that. Karen snapped, he's making things up. Mark wouldn't do something illegal. But Mark wasn't defending himself anymore. He was sweating, breathing shallow, avoiding Blake's gaze. And that's when Karen realized something terrifying. She hadn't teamed up with a powerful man. She'd teamed up with a sinking ship. Muck, she whispered, voice trembling. What did you do? He didn't answer, because in that moment, both of them finally understood. They didn't corner me. They cornered themselves.
Karen suddenly stepped away from Mark like he was radioactive, her voice dropping to a shaky whisper. You said everything was legal. You said I'd be protected. Mark didn't answer. He kept staring at Officer Blake, who was observing both of them with the patience of someone watching two people dig their own graves. All right, Blake said calmly. Let's keep this simple. I'll review the footage, then we'll talk. Karen panicked. No, we don't need footage. Let's just find him and... Blake held up his hand. Karen, you don't decide that. That tiny sentence cut right through her ego. You could see it. Her mouth opened, then snapped shut like she suddenly remembered she wasn't in charge of the whole world. I stepped forward slowly. I'll go grab the laptop. As I turned, Karen blurted out, You can't use secret cameras. That's illegal. Blake didn't even look at her. Exterior security cameras are legal. Karen blinked. But he recorded Mark. On his land. Perfectly lawful. Mark visibly deflated. His shoulders sagged like the truth was physically draining him. I went into the house and grabbed the laptop. When I returned, Blake motioned for us all to move toward the porch where the glare wouldn't hit the screen. Karen hovered behind Mark, frantic, grabbing his sleeve. You told me he was nobody. You said he couldn't fight back. Mark pulled his arm away. He wasn't supposed to have evidence. Their little alliance was cracking right in front of me. I set the laptop on the porch rail and clicked the video folder. There it was, time-stamped, crystal clear. Mark creeping onto my property late at night, holding a measuring tape, taking pictures of my hedges, adjusting angles, trying again. Karen gasped. Mark, what the hell? Blake leaned in closer. That's you. On his land, after 10 p.m. Mark swallowed hard. I can explain. Karen snapped. You lied to me. You told me he was the problem. You told me he needed to be controlled. Blake switched his D's to Karen. What did he tell you exactly? Karen froze. That question was too sharp, too dangerous. Suddenly, all her confidence evaporated. She looked around as if hoping someone would magically show up and take her side. When nobody did, she whispered, He said we could force him into the HOA, that it would be easy money, and that the fines would scare him into compliance. Blake turned to Mark. You attempting to extort him? Mark's face crumbled. No, she misunderstood. Karen exaggerates. She's not exaggerating, I cut in quietly. You both pushed fake rules. You forged a directive. You used my power without permission. And you damaged your own car trying to steal electricity. Mark looked at the ground. Karen looked like she'd been slapped. Then Blake asked the question that froze both of them. Should I call county investigators for HOA fraud? Or do you two want to talk separately? Karen's knees almost buckled. Mark looked like he might faint, and I stood there silently, watching the very people who tried to control my land lose their entire world.
Karen grabbed Mark's arm like she was clinging to a sinking boat. You said nobody would figure anything out, she whispered, her voice cracking.
You said he wouldn't fight back. You promised. Mark pulled away from her, shaking his head. Karen, stop talking, please. Everything you say makes this worse. Officer Blake kept his eyes on both of them, arms crossed, calm but sharp. Backup is on the way. Until then, everyone stays right here. Karen stared at Blake like she couldn't believe a cop wasn't automatically on her side. But, officer, he's dangerous. He sabotaged my Tesla. He didn't sabotage anything, Blake said. Your car pulled unauthorized voltage from his emergency system. That's on you. Karen's jaw trembled. Mark's face crumpled in defeat. And that's when Blake turned to me. You all right? I nodded. Yeah, I'm fine. Karen suddenly snapped out of her panic and lunged toward me, not to attack, but to get closer, pleading. You don't understand, she said breathlessly. Mark told me you were some nobody living on old land. He said you wouldn't know the rules. He said you'd fold if we pressured you. I didn't answer. And then, she continued, tears gathering at the corners of her eyes, he said your power outlet was basically community property. He said I could charge any time. Mark exploded. Karen, stop talking! But she didn't. Her fear pushed her forward. He said you weren't even paying taxes on this place, that you bought it cheap, that you'd do anything to avoid attention. I finally looked at her. Who told you that? She pointed at Mark without hesitation. He did! Mark's head snapped up. That's a lie. Karen didn't blink. He told me everything. He said you were the perfect target. Blake exhaled a long breath. So this was planned. Mark's voice cracked. No, it wasn't a plan. It was, she misunderstood. Karen stepped closer to Blake now, desperate for a lifeline. He said if I helped him make you join the HOA, he'd reduce my fines. He said we'd both get something out of it. Blake shook his head slowly. Bribery, coercion, false enforcement, that's stacking up fast. Mark finally broke. I didn't mean for it to go this far. She's the one who kept pushing it. She kept demanding power access, saying the HOA could take anything she wanted. Karen gasped. Wow, so now I'm the villain. You are! You're the one who tried plugging into his grid after I told you not to. Blake stepped forward, raising his voice just enough to shut them both up. Enough. Silence slammed down like a door. And in that silence, a familiar sound rolled up the street. A second police car. Karen let out a tiny sob. Mark closed his eyes like a man waiting for a sentence. Blake looked at me. Before my partner gets out, is there anything else you want to add? And for the first time, I felt the weight of everything. My dad's old land, the system we built, the line Karen crossed, the lies Mark spread, the way they tried to turn the whole block against me. I could have stayed quiet, let the cops handle it, but a single truth rose in my chest, steady, cold, clear. My dad served 20 years. He taught me to protect what we build, and he taught me never to let anybody abuse authority to steal from us. Karen wiped her face, trembling. We didn't know. That's the problem. You never cared to know. Blake nodded slowly, like that told him everything. His partner stepped out of the second patrol car, and Karen whispered the line that revealed how deeply she had lost. Please don't let them take me away. I don't want the whole neighborhood to see. But it was too late, because the whole neighborhood was already watching.
Karen stood frozen as the second officer approached, her hands trembling so hard she tried to hide them behind her back. Across the street, doors cracked open, blinds shifted, silhouettes gathered. The neighborhood wasn't whispering anymore. They were watching. The second officer, Torres, joined Blake. "What do we have?" Blake nodded toward Karen and Mark. "Unauthorized HOA enforcement, attempted extortion, trespassing, tampering with private utilities, and damage caused by unauthorized power use." Torres let out a low whistle. "That's a handful." Karen's voice cracked. "Officer, I didn't extort anyone. I didn't trespass. I just plugged my car in." Torres looked at her calmly. "Ma'am, using someone's power without permission is theft." That word, theft, hit her like a slap. She stumbled back. "I'm not a thief. I'm not. Mark told me." Torres turned to Mark. "You're the HOA president, right?" Mark didn't answer. He just stared at the ground, sweat rolling down his temples. Blake spoke. He forged a boundary extension, tried to force him into the HOA, told Karen she had authority she didn't. Torres sighed. "Okay, we need statements." When Torres stepped forward with a notepad, Karen panicked. Wait, please, can we handle this privately? He doesn't want trouble. He just misunderstood us." I shook my head. "No, I understood you perfectly." She stared at me like the world had abandoned her. "Please," she whispered, "don't do this. I'll pay for the Tesla. I'll apologize. I'll never come near your property again." But her apology wasn't for the damage. It was for her fear of humiliation. Mark finally spoke, voice cracked and bitter. "You're making a scene, Karen. Just shut up." Karen turned on him. "Oh, you made a scene the moment you dragged me into your stupid plan. You told me this would be easy. You said he was weak." Blake lifted an eyebrow. "Weak?" Karen froze. I stepped forward, just enough for her to feel the weight of it. I wasn't weak. I was patient. Torres looked at us both. "You two will need to come down to the station for questioning." Karen's breath caught. No, please. My reputation, my job, my HOA position." Blake answered softly, "You should have thought about that before abusing the role." Mark whispered something under his breath, too low to catch, but the defeated slump of his shoulders told the story. As Blake guided them toward the patrol car, something unexpected happened. Karen stopped, turned her head slightly, and said in a small, breaking voice, "You protected your land like it mattered." I held her gaze. "It does," I said. "Always has." She blinked hard like she might cry, then looked away before her mask shattered completely. Mark muttered, "This was supposed to make us money." Blake shot him a glare. "Instead, it's costing you everything." The officers opened the patrol car doors, and the entire street watched, silent, judgment heavy in the air as Karen and Mark were guided inside. The door shut, the engine started, and the entire street exhaled. But as the car rolled forward, I wasn't thinking about revenge or satisfaction or even justice. I was thinking about my dad, how he fought for everything we had, how he trusted me to protect this land, and how tonight I finally understood what he meant when he said, "Power isn't about what you hold, it's about what you refuse to let others take."
The street finally settled into silence, the hum of the Tesla long gone, the neighbors retreating behind their curtains. I stood on my porch, hands in my pockets, watching the officers drive away with Karen and Mark inside the patrol car. It felt unreal, like the world had flipped upside down and now righted itself again. I went back to the shed and ran my fingers over the old metal box, the green lights blinking steadily. Dad had taught me that some things weren't just machines, they were statements. A reminder that the people who respect boundaries survive, and the ones who don't face consequences. My phone buzzed with a text from a neighbor across the street. "Saw everything. You handled that like a pro. Hero of the block." I smiled. Not for glory, but because the lesson was clear. Standing your ground, quietly, patiently, sometimes spoke louder than shouting.
I stepped onto the lawn and looked toward the corner where Karen's Tesla had been plugged in. It wasn't just about electricity, it was about control, lies, and arrogance. She had tried to take something that wasn't hers, thinking no one would stop her, and now everyone knew the truth. A few kids peeked out from behind their parents' legs, whispering excitedly. One muttered, "Wow, he totally owned them." I chuckled softly. That was the last twist. They thought it was just a petty power dispute, but it had exposed fraud, abuse, and arrogance on a scale neither Karen nor Mark had ever imagined. I walked inside, flipped the porch light off, and poured a glass of water. The quiet of my house wrapped around me like a shield. The sense of relief was deep. My family was safe. My property was respected. Justice, in its own quiet, satisfying way, had been served. Before heading to bed, I glanced back toward the corner of the yard, the breeze rustling through the trees. I whispered softly, almost to myself. I didn't fight for this land to let anyone steal from it. Not Karen, not Mark, not anyone. And for the first time in a long while, the street felt like it belonged to me. Not because I had power over it, but because I had stood firm and the truth had finally shined through. Karen's lesson had been harsh, but it was unforgettable. Arrogance and deceit can never outrun accountability. And as I turned off the lights and closed the door, I knew the neighborhood, and maybe even the world, had witnessed a subtle but perfect victory.